Hello folks, today we want to be looking at a video from Mengs about 5 risky mechanic Fire Emblem. 5 risky mechanics Fire Emblem should try. I am a pretty big fan of Fire Emblem. I played like the 3 GBA games and the 2, I played the GameCube Path of Radiance and the Wii Radiant Down games. Unfortunately, that was all I played. I didn't have like a 3DS. I tried playing the Nintendo DS ones, but they were just too ugly for me. Like the pre-rendered graphics were just terrible. I couldn't really like endure them. I am also a pretty big fan of Mangs, and I also am a pretty big fan of like these discussions of what like this discussions of like how to make a good game. Like this is what I'm all about. So without further ado, let's get into it.
Whenever a new Fire Emblem game comes around, it's always interesting to see what kind of new mechanics the developers will try to throw into the mix. Even though the core rules of Fire Emblem have remained relatively consistent since its first installment, there's always something different in every new game. Awakening brought with it the pair-up feature, which was later perfected in
One thing I really enjoy about Fire Emblem over like other like tactics game like Final Fantasy Tactics is how much positioning matters. Because it's like, in Fire Emblem, like in Final Fantasy Tactics, it's like their characters have way too much, like they're too bulky. They have too much HP, too much defense. And the game is kind of like built around like, like you taking damage because you have so much HP, you don't even care about it, right? But Fire Emblem is like, you don't want to take damage, right? It's like Fire Emblem is like, you have to carefully position your troops so that you don't take any damage, because any damage could be lethal. Like, I would argue that Final Fantasy has like a more like Dungeons and Dragons kind of combat where it's like a little bit more dumbed down, while Fire Emblem has a more like GURPS idea of like combat where you do not want to get hit, because if you get hit, you might get an injury, you might get like you will get shock, and then you get like when you get like shock in GURPS, you get like a penalty from for like dexterity and I think damage as well. It's you do not want to get damaged. Like in GURPS, you want to like fight as much as you possibly can without taking damage. And there are units in Fire Emblem which is like all about taking damage, like the generals, but those units are not overall like not very good. Like they're pretty like nerfed because they kind of break the idea of the game. So it's a really like it really brings it really forces players to play very strategic, while I feel like Final Fantasy Tactics is like I don't think it's very tactics, to be honest. I feel like Final Fantasy Tactics is more like it's Final Fantasy with extra steps, in my opinion.
Fates. Echoes had the turn wheel, Three Houses had battalions, and Engage had its emblem rings. Since I've played every single Fire Emblem game in this had battalions, pair-up feature, which was later perfected in Fates. Echoes had the turn Awakening consistent since its fix. Even though the core rules of Fire Emblem have remained relatively consistent since its first installment, there's always something different in every new game. Awakening brought with it the pair-up feature, which was later perfected in Fates.
Okay.
Echoes had the turn wheel, Three
Turn wheel.
Houses
I have no idea what those are, by the way.
had battalions, and
I don't know what battalions are.
Engage had its emblem rings.
Oh, I remembered like this because I watched his streams on Engage. Yeah, the rings of whatever is it called? Engage rings, I think it's called. It's basically like you get like the spirits of like old Fire Emblem heroes, and you can like fuse with them and become like Super Saiyan, basically.
Since I've played every single Fire Emblem game in the series, I thought I'd try to come up with 5 new mechanics that I would love to see in a future Fire Emblem game. Let's begin. Number 1. Resolve. One thing that I find severely lacking in Fire Emblem is a way to show how your characters deal with the turmoil and rigors of war. Sure, you have hit points, which indicates a character's overall physical health, but those can be healed up quickly with a staff or vulnerary. Tricia776 tried to implement a mechanic like this by adding fatigue, but I personally would like to see a system that's a bit more interactive than a character just being undeployable for a mission. And so here is my idea for Resolve. If you've played the Darkest Dungeon games, you will already understand where I'm going with this one. Each character will have a resolve meter that goes down when certain things happen on the battlefield. When a character takes a hit, their resolve goes down by a little bit. But when bad things happen, like characters suffering a major critical hit, resolve gets dropped by a lot. Your units can also lose resolve whenever their allies get crit or die, as it is very traumatizing to watch your friends suffer. When this resolve meter reaches 0, a unit's resolve is tested, similar to Darkest Dungeon. You see a close-up of their...
Like, I feel like the fatigue could come back. It could be interesting to, like, force players to, like, rotate their troops. Because in Fire Emblem, you kind of have, like, the top 10 characters that you play on every single mission, and it's just kind of like... I mean, I guess I get it, because it's a kind of RPG, and you want to level up your best units. And fatigue, like, kind of, like, annoys that. It kind of forces you playing with units that you wouldn't normally play. Which is interesting. But this seems like too punishing. It seemed like if this was like an option, it should be like this could be optional, but like for hardcore players. But anything else than that would be like too much for new players. It would scare away new players.
Portrait, and then a myriad of random effects can happen, from various status conditions being inflicted, to temporary stat penalties, to losing control of a character completely and having them try to run away. However, there's also a chance that when a character's resolve is tested, that they fight through it and gain a buff instead. This resolve chance could be based on the character's stats, like their luck or constitution, or maybe a brand new stat can be implemented, similar to Treehouse's Charm, a willpower stat if you will, that increases brand new...
This mechanic is like... biorhythm was bizarre. Like, oh my gosh, this was so weird. Like, I have no idea how this works to this day. I played this game, I played the follow-up, the sequel of this game. To this day, I have no idea how the fuck this works. It's so strange.
Stat can be implemented, similar to Treehouse's Charm, a willpower stat if you will, that increases a character's resolve meter, but also reduces their chances to break when they are tested. This mechanic could also interact with other established ones like staves. There could exist special staves that restore a character's resolve instead of their HP, giving your healers another crucial job on the battlefield. Your dancers could be used to do more than just give a character extra actions. They could literally be your army's main resolve healers, restoring resolve to all nearby characters whenever they perform. Certain bosses could have dangerous abilities that affect your playable characters, draining their resolve in an area of effect. And overall, there's just a lot of cool stuff you could do with a mechanic like this. Of course, people generally speaking do not like losing control over their characters, and can feel frustrated when it's essentially up to an RNG roll. And it also adds a rather dangerous snowball effect that punishes players further when bad things are already happening. So I'm not saying it's perfect or that people will enjoy it, just that I think it would be pretty cool to see in a Fire Emblem game. Number 2. Flanking. In many grid-based strategy games, you will generally get some kind of bonus if you manage to attack an enemy from behind, especially if they're already preoccupied with another unit. Triangle Strategy did this masterfully by allowing all flanking characters to perform a follow-up attack every time the unit they were facing got hit, which could quickly snowball your damage output to ludicrous levels, and was incredibly satisfying to watch. While I'm not advocating Fire Emblem do something to this magnitude, it would be nice to see a small bonus whenever you have two characters attacking someone from opposite directions. Something as simple as a small bonus to hit and damage would be nice.
Yeah,
with certain thief and assassin classes, maybe having a class skill that greatly increases their crit rate.
And then they could have like the opposite too. If you attack someone from the front, they would have like more avoid and maybe even hit.
Whenever they're
making a really good idea actually. This is really good.
A flanking attack. Overall, I'd love to see more position-based mechanics in Fire Emblem, and I think a flanking bonus would be a really cool mechanic to incorporate. Number 3. Attacks of Opportunity. If you played Dungeons & Dragons, you will be familiar with this mechanic. Attacks of opportunity occur when someone tries to move through a space that is controlled by another hostile character. Effectively, if I have a mercenary and say I want to move it past a soldier, this soldier will get a free attack on me as I pass through him, though that attack still needs to hit normally and may fail. This is a mechanic that is made to counteract cheesy play, where you just run one of your units through a throng of enemies to attack a squishy healer in the back with no consequences. Some people really like this mechanic in D&D, as it rewards positioning and punishes reckless play, while others think it's an overly restrictive mechanic that hampers mobility and slows down the game. I can see both sides of the coin here, but I think that attacks of opportunity could be a cool mechanic in Fire Emblem if implemented in a right way. For example, attacks made...
Because, like, a lot of the times, like, dude, there are, like, these mages on this game, and they are fucking bitches. They get, like, one shot by literally everything. Like, mages, archers, healers, and it's just, like, so cheesy, dude. And it's like, sure, it kind of rewards, like, you positioning, like, in a way so that, like, so that you have to not leave your, like, weakness exposed. But the enemy AI isn't going to think like that, so they're just going to be stupid with their units. And this could fix, like, a major AI issue, actually. So this could be interesting. It's going to make the game harder, actually. And also easier for new players, you know, in a weird way. Like, it would make positioning a little bit easier, actually. This is a really good idea that he's making.
This way could receive an innate minus 20% chance to hit, or have their damage halved, making them unlikely.
Yeah, like, no, like, on an attack opportunity, like, maybe they could have, like, some kind of nerf. Like, you know, like, oh, he doesn't hit as well, or maybe or maybe you get, like, a better miss. I don't know, something like that. But it would be a really cool idea,
to succeed, and not super harmful when they do. But some classes that specialize in defense and zone control, like Armor Knights, could have this penalty removed, making them great at defending other healers, which is supposed to be their job in the first place. Cavalry, on the other hand, with their great speed and ability to do ride-by attacks, could be less affected by attacks of opportunity, and flying units like Pegasus Knights could avoid them entirely. You could also have archers do something similar to the over...
do it because Nintendo is so fucking lazy. They just copy and paste, like, the old game with, like, new levels every single time. This has been their, like, way of making games ever since Nintendo Wii. So we are not going to see something so exciting as that. But if any, like, indie game based on Fire Emblem does this, it would be really cool to see, for sure.
Enter their squares, still, and focus their attention at a certain area of the map, attacking the first unit to enter their squares. Setting up Overwatch attacks is a very cool mechanic that I greatly enjoyed whenever I played XCOM, and I think it would be cool to do something similar in Fire Emblem. Overall, I just like to see more tools given to the player to reward proper positioning. And while some people may think that Fire Emblem is already complicated enough, I for one think it would be a really cool addition. Number 4. Second Waves. Second waves are a bunch of really cool mechanics from the XCOM series that allows you to toggle on a bunch of different side effects for your game. These effects can both be helpful and damaging to the player, and some just make the game more chaotic and unpredictable. An example of what a second wave effect can do is randomize all the skills your unit get, which leads to some absolutely hilarious damaging to the player, and a bunch of different side effects for your game. These effects can both be helpful and damaging to the player, and some just make the game more chaotic and unpredictable. An example of what a second wave effect can do is randomize all the skills your unit get, which leads to some absolutely hilarious builds. Another one greatly varies the damage output of both your units and the enemies, making a game that is very random, volatile, and dangerous. What I absolutely love about the second wave effects is that they add so much replayability to the game, which is something I feel Fire Emblem has been lacking of late. Here's a few examples of second wave effects that I made up that could be applied to the next Fire Emblem game. Randomized Potential randomly shuffles the growth rates of all playable characters, making them great in some areas and terrible in others. You gain some, you lose some. Every time a character...
So far this looks bad. So far this looks really bad. Upon leveling up, characters have a 50% chance to gain +2 or...
levels up, there's a 50% chance that they will gain 2 stats instead of 1, but
this is going to ruin units and people are going to be mad about it. It's too RNG. I'm not a huge fan of it. I get that the whole point of, like, this mechanic that he's trying to do is probably, like, to make players adapt and improvise instead of having like this OP god tier unit that you're supposed to always level up and go to, you like kind of like choose on the spot, like you kind of have to improvise on like what you get. I get all of this. I get that it's going to like personalize playthroughs a lot more than it should, but it's too RNG and it would be too frustrating and too complicated. I guess I'm not a huge fan of this.
But there's also a 50% chance that they will lose a stat instead of gaining it. Triangle Madness triples the effects of the weapon triangle.
Why? It's already so big.
Both bonuses and penalties. Frail weapons. When attacking, there's a 1% chance that a weapon will break, regardless of how much durability it has left. Quantity over quality.
I don't like
Doubles the critical hit rate of all units,
like
both
this at all.
playable and enemy, but makes those critical hits only deal 2 times damage instead of 3.
at all.
Devil's Curse. All units in the game, both players and enemies, suffers from the Devil Axe reversal effect, giving them a 31% minus their luck chance to damage themselves on attacks. These are just a few second wave effects I came up with on the spot. I could literally make hundreds of these with enough time and creativity. And just imagine how much chaos it would be to toggle on every single one of them for a single playthrough of Fire Emblem. A mechanic like this would add
wouldn't like
so
it.
many new fun ways for people to challenge themselves on their consecutive playthroughs. And I'm absolutely baffled that
Like how would you feel if you're like Sun Tzu? You're like the biggest, most overpowered, most talented Chinese general, and out of sudden, the Lord Almighty decides that, oh, I am going to change the rules of physics for this particular combat and for this particular combat only. It would be so frustrating and annoying. Like it would be fun for like a again, like if just like an optional thing that you can like toggle off before you start the game, or if it's like something for like New Game Plus or something like that, you can have this choice just to make like more fun, just make it more challenging. Then sure, I can kind of get it. But as is, this is not a very like this should never be like a standard mechanic. I don't think so.
not more strategy games have implemented this mechanic. On a second note, second waves could also be used to add randomizers to the game, or even a self-imposed Iron Man mode where you're not allowed to load saves, but I'm getting ahead of myself here. Number 5. Day-Night Cycle. This idea is not mine, but stems from a fake Fire Emblem leak that I covered on this channel many years ago from what is now dubbed Castlevania Emblem. It proposed a really cool mechanic that would center around a day-night cycle in Fire Emblem, where on some outdoor maps you would have an orb which would show the sun gradually settling and eventually be replaced by a moon. This would affect more than just the atmosphere and aesthetics. During the night, maps would turn into Fog of War with reduced...
It wouldn't really make sense because like it wouldn't actually... This idea is interesting, but the problem with this idea is that like it would have to change the way how the whole game is built around. Because like the game is like, you know, sometimes like the adventure is like Fire Emblem is a game that is kind of based around like a D&D campaign, right? So it's like sometimes, you know, like your troops are resting in a village, and at night they get ambushed by enemy troops, right? So they have to fight with the penalties of night, which is usually Fog of War. So now, like throughout the combat, like I mean, sure it would start at night, but then like it would become day and it would become night, and like 7 days would pass, when in reality, in the story, only a few hours had passed. This wouldn't really fit with the format very well, unless it's unless it's like I think it was Fire Emblem 5 or 4, I don't remember, where it was meant to be like there was like 10 chapters, but they were like really long chapters because each chapter was supposed to be like a long battle, a long ass war that is like dragged out.
Vision, and it would also affect certain units differently depending on their classes. In this particular leak, it was theorized that the next Fire Emblem game would include units such as vampires and werewolves, who would be greatly affected by the day-night cycles.
Obviously.
Vampires would be much weaker during the day, and during the night they would gain
Now, with
bonus
that being
stats.
said, this mechanic is really cool on Warcraft 3, where they actually have like the Night Elves, which the whole specialization of them is that they're better at night than at day, right? So they like Blizzard kind of made like this new mechanic, and then they made like a new faction that works better at like 50% of the time, and then the other 50% of the time they're just kind of like terrible. Um, so it's like an interesting concept for sure. I don't think it's bad. I just think it doesn't really fit the game.
And gain the ability to fly as bats, whereas werewolves would transform into their bestial forms and gain massive bonuses to their movement and stats, akin to the Lagoose of the Tellius games. The day-night cycle would also interact with certain skills. Luna would have a greater chance to proc and have a stronger effect during the night, whereas Sol would similarly proc more often
Yeah,
and be
you could make
stronger
something like
during
that
the
for
day.
sure.
Some of the stronger characters would also be powerful enough to affect the day-night cycle,
By the way, this
being
mechanic is really cool for RTS, and I don't know why. Like we don't see it like we only have seen it really on Warcraft 3. I don't know why. StarCraft 2 doesn't have it. I feel like that's weird. StarCraft 2 could have it. I guess the reason why it doesn't have it is because like you're playing like in different planets, and maybe those planets don't really have like a sun or something like that. I don't know.
able to summon eclipses, which temporarily
Or
turns
maybe
day
they have
into
like two
night
suns, and then they don't really have like a normal day cycle.
for a single turn. Furthermore, the main
But it's a really
character
cool
would have an
mechanic.
artifact in their position capable of altering, slowing, or even speeding up the day-night cycle, making it a tool to be exploited by the player. Of course, a day-night gimmick would have several problems. First of all, it basically means that most battles would have to be fought over several days, which could be a problem with the narrative of the story, and it would also have a much smaller impact on indoor maps, where the sun and moon are not visible. Still, I think that if used in a Fire Emblem game where it thematically would make sense, a day-night mechanic would be a really cool addition. I gotta be honest, guys, I thought the Castlevania emblem was a really cool concept, and I was actually very sad when the leaks turned out to be false. So yeah, those are 5 mechanics I would personally love to see in a future Fire Emblem game. Do you agree or disagree with any of these? Or maybe you have some mechanics you want to propose yourself? Let me hear about them in the comments section below. Leave a like and subscribe for more Fire Emblem content, and thanks to my editor Davis G for putting this video together. My name has been Mengs, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.
Very cool video for sure. I like two ideas, right? It was so like this is it just wouldn't work for Fire Emblem, unfortunately. It just isn't like the thing. This would work as like a new game plus kind of a thing, maybe, or like a hardcore, like at the start of the game you can toggle this if you want more challenge or more chaos. If you want a challenge, really, like. This is genius. This is really cool. This is necessary. Like, I don't even think this is like a risky mechanic. I feel like this is like a mechanic that, like, I don't know why they don't do it. Honestly, like, initially the reason why they didn't do it is because like it was 2D sprites, and the 2D sprites like it would take more effort and work to have like these sprites facing places. It would take more resources. So the game would be like more expensive and harder to make. Now that the game is like the Fire Emblem games are in 3D, there's no reason for Fire Emblem games to don't have this. It's so baffling that they don't have it, just because the previous games didn't have it. It's so bad. And this would also work as a hardcore option that you can toggle at the beginning of the game. And unfortunately, for this to work, I mean, I just don't see it really. I really can't see it. But overall, like four of these ideas are pretty good. Two of them are way too risky. Um, but yeah, I 100% agree with like two of these ideas. They're pretty
Just attacking.
interesting for sure. And I mean, like to be honest, like dude, Fire Emblem needs like a new fresh mechanics, because it's like, dude, every single like Fire Emblem feels so samey. It feels really samey. Like looking at like Engage and Tree Houses, I can't really see much of a difference between one game and the other. Like, I just don't. But yeah, I guess this is going to be my video, my reaction to this. And yeah, um, I guess this is it. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.